There's a lot of kids out there who need your help, and a donation to St. Jude could potentially save them. Link to my fundraiser is in the description.
Credits will do fine.
Hey, we got a new Star Wars game! That's cool! I would like to give Star Wars Jedi Survivor the time of the day at some point in National Star Wars Day Special, but since it's coming out 6 days before this video is supposed to go live, meaning it's not out at the time I'm recording this, if I decide to make it the subject today, that means I'd have to play it from start to finish, write a script, and then make the video all in less than a week. And for someone like me,
that's a big ask.
So I thought it'd be a fun idea to instead look back on Survivor's predecessor to celebrate its release. And besides, I have plenty to work with in terms of what's offered with Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. Back when it was about to be released in the holiday season of 2019, I was interested by what was shown off in the advertising, but there was a giant asterisk involved, and that would be this. I'm sure you've already heard about some of the sour things that EA's done within the past decade, but there was a giant amount of skepticism at the time, because last time they had their hands on Star Wars, Battlefront 2 DICE and its loot box system happened. You know you did something wrong when politics and news networks got involved. While yes, this was a single-player game, and thus not as easy to include a monetized system, I was not willing to put it above EA to try something like that. So, I chose to wait and let it simmer in the public mind for a while. Pokemon Sword and Shield coming out the same day made that decision easier. However, not only did a sketchy practice never happen to the game, but a lot of people really enjoyed it. As such, I decided to give it a shot for Christmas of that year, and it was a big surprise to be sure. But a welcome one. I was caught off guard by how much the game was able to immerse me into various worlds, yet also challenge me with all the fun tools I had at my disposal. Admittedly, it has been a little while since I've played it, but I thought I might as well, given Jedi Survivor's release. And besides, I was able to freely upgrade to the PS5 version, meaning performance will definitely be smoother than it was back then. So, let's get right into this. Okay, an opening crawl today. I gotcha. So our story begins on Bracca, a planet filled with old ships used in the Clone Wars, with people scrounging up their remains for money, including our main hero, Cal Kestis, a Jedi Padawan who went into hiding following Order 66. Yeah, for those in the dark, this takes place after the prequels before the original trilogy. After an incident while on the job where he uses the Force to save one of his friends, look at that, now the Empire's on him. But in the nick of time, he does receive assistance from Cere Junda, a former Jedi, and Grease, a mercenary who's basically acting as Cere's pilot. So now that staying on Bracca is out of the question, Cal decides to team up with these two and this little droid he finds called BD-1, who is adorable by the way, in order to find a hidden Jedi holocron that has the names of all the Force-sensitive children in the galaxy. If they can find it, they can not only rebuild the Jedi Order, but they can also keep it out of the hands of the Empire, because if they got it, well, take a wild guess. So the story in general is basically preventing the Empire from doing something dangerous, but what I like about it is that they don't just stop there and give you quests. They try to fit in personal stories for the characters and give some background to each place you visit. Cal's personal guilt over the death of his former master, Jaro Tapal, and how that has badly damaged his connection to the Force over the course of 5 years since Order 66, is definitely the character arc that gets the most focus. I mean, he had to go into hiding to stay alive for a while after such an event, not to mention his one usage of the Force unintentionally led to the death of someone else he shared a bond with, but over the course of the game, we see just how much this guilt truly did take him over, through various nightmares and flashbacks, which has a huge payoff once we see what happened to him when Order 66 was carried out. This part in particular I think was very well done, as there were plenty of times where he got scared and even hesitated when it came to some things, but also seeing the close he formed a friendship with now out to kill him must have been ungodly heart-wrenching, with the added detail that after the Order, the clones never address him by his name, almost like they don't even recognize him. So Cal's journey to repair his connection to the Force has a lot more weight, when it also means coming to terms with what has happened, and finding the courage to forgive himself. I really like what they do with Cal here, as they give him plenty to work with in terms of development, and the moments where he's allowed to be a little lighter or just really emotional feel genuine. I really like how they handle Cere as well. She does want to contribute to a noble cause, but when you find out about her failure to keep her Padawan hidden and safe from the Empire, and from being turned over to the dark side by proxy, as well as her reasoning for her cutoff from the Force, that being she lets her rage get the best of her too easily, and thus gets too far into the dark side unintentionally, it does make you question if she's doing the right thing for the right reason. Now, she doesn't become an antagonist or anything, but I do really like how she does want to do good, and is remorseful for the damage her flaws did, especially to her Padawan, and yet doesn't fully get rid of them. It makes sense given that you can't relinquish general anger that easily. Now, her apprentice, Trilla Sudari, aka the second sister of the Inquisitors, is an incredibly effective villain. Her feeling of betrayal from Seer's failure makes her fall to the dark side really sad, but they only try to get you to sympathize with her when it's appropriate, and the result from that feeling is someone who has completely gone psychotic, and will not stop until she succeeds in wiping out as many Jedi as possible, Cal included, or winning the Emperor's favor if applicable. She legit made me feel uncomfortable in the ways the game intended, and I was always on my toes for whenever she showed up next. It was also cool to see that the game actually does explore some pieces of Star Wars lore more, namely the Jedi Code and the Force. It's nice that the game explores more of the flaws of the Jedi system, and how they led to their downfall, because it shows that maybe the conflict between the light and the dark side of the Force isn't as clear-cut as you might think. It isn't something the series is dabbling into for the first time, but it's another good chance, and I feel the motivations of every hero and villain you come across become a lot more concrete, and even somewhat impactful. As for the latter, I was interested in how each character had a different interaction with the Force. They could have so easily made it just this cool gameplay mechanic that you have, but they keep true to the original idea of it being mysterious and not having one specific form. Yet they give ways each character can use it for both character moments and gameplay. For one final thing, despite Order 66 being the thing that leads to this plot happening, and a small number of other characters from the series appearing in this, Jedi Fallen Order is a largely self-contained narrative. It does enlighten you in what exactly has happened, and what is currently going on, that it largely works as its own story. You don't really need to watch any of the movies or any of the shows in order to understand this plot. The most Star Wars knowledge will get you is a reaction to an Easter egg that might be in the game itself, or the cutscenes. But as a Star Wars fan, of course I got a lot of those Easter eggs.
This is Master Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Hello there! It all comes together to form a story that I honestly think was very well done. I know we get a lot of Star Wars spin-offs nowadays, especially some that build into other spin-offs, but I really like how this one stays in its lane and doesn't go too big or melodramatic. It's able to make you care about each and every character, give each place its own little story to tell, and let the emotions sink in when it's necessary, as well as give some generally lighter moments when it's needed. I really enjoy the story. It feels kind of weird that the grand majority of my personal criticisms with this game are with the presentation. Not to say I don't have any with the story or gameplay, though I think of with the story are pretty negligible, but when looking at the game with a little more of a critical eye, and when thinking of things that bugged me, it was mostly with the presentation. But despite all that, the game still looks really good for a late 8th generation console title, and a Star Wars game set in the post-Episode 3, pre-Episode 4 era. Each one of the planets you go to really have this atmosphere that make them feel vast and larger than life, but despite it clearly going for an art style that's trying to replicate the live-action movies, it doesn't sacrifice color for the sake of looking real. It doesn't use its art direction to deliver a presentation that feels cheap, or trying to flex what technology is capable of at that time. It feels like a genuine representation of what the Star Wars universe is like post-Episode 3. From all the rundown towns and buildings in places like Pagano, to Kashyyyk having a section dedicated to its jungle setting, and another one that's more of a refinery for the Empire, to Zeffo that is home to tons of different things. But even though they didn't sacrifice color, sometimes the lighting engine attempts to do that. I mean, the lighting for the most part is totally fine, but there's a select number of times and spots where it feels like the source point changes and you suddenly get a picture that's mostly black. And sometimes, yeah, it can be distracting. But not as distracting as the game's occasional environmental and texture pop-in. This isn't a super frequent issue either, at least on PS5, and I will take it over texture pop-in being more common and the game sometimes freezing to load apart in the map like it sometimes did in earlier versions on consoles like the PS4, which I am happy Respawn addressed by the way, but still, there's just like few cracks hidden here and there. Speaking of cracks, I know a lot of people have pointed out that the game isn't exactly glitch-free, and while this is true, despite me never coming across that many, I think it was only a small handful, I've barely seen any that legitimately break the game, so I don't know if some versions are more stable, or Respawn patched some of them with passing updates, but I don't think your experience should be frustrating because of it. It's just a little unpolished in a few areas, which should be manageable. In fact, now that I'm thinking about playing the PS5 version as opposed to the PS4, I barely came across any frame rate issues, and the load times were not that bad. The PS4 release didn't run awfully per se, but there were some frame drops from time to time, and while I could play the game fine at 30 frames, it's good to see that they allowed you to customize how you want the game to run here. The game is set to 30 frames with motion blur on by default, but you can thankfully set a little graphical fidelity in favor of running at 60 frames, and turn things like motion blur off, like I did. So happy this is becoming more of the norm. The motion capture is mostly really solid. I mean, it varies more and more in the cutscenes, as there's a couple animations here and there that look a little awkward, but it all shines more in gameplay. Okay, Cal's running animation kind of looks like he's looking for the nearest bathroom, but the attack animations look incredibly natural. The finishes in particular look dazzling and stylish, the exclusive ones Cal has against some tougher opponents look even better, and some skills you get later on follow suit. It's also neat that the cutscenes are in real time, meaning any cosmetics carry into them. The voice acting is also great. Cameron Monaghan does a great job with Cal, selling his cynicism and his fear of confronting his past, yet also having a little fun while at it. Deborah Wilson as Seer was a delight no matter what the character was feeling at that moment. And as for my personal highlight, Elizabeth Grulon, I am so sorry if I got that last name wrong, as Trilla nailed the psychotic bloodlust of the character. Like, seriously, that's the voice I want to come out of the mouth of someone with those eyes. The music I don't remember a ton of, but I do think they all fit the parts of the game that they're placed in. But I will say, the select number of times they borrow a track from the movies were incredibly effective. Cal's flashback to Order 66 was already a well done part in terms of storytelling, but actually having the same track from Revenge of the Sith play here... How do you constantly make Order 66 tragic despite the amount of times it gets featured in spin-offs? I would be lying if I said the presentation of the game was flawless, and yeah, you can definitely tell where the cracks are. But at the end of the day, it still looks and sounds really good, it runs really well, and there's plenty of touches that I appreciate, which is pretty much all that matters. It is no Uncharted 4, Spider-Man 2018, or Devil May Cry 5 in this area, but it still gets the job done. Now the story and the visuals emulating the Star Wars universe are cool and all, but I'm willing to bet a lot of you wanted to buy the game so that you can wave a giant glowy space sword around like this guy. I'm a Jedi! And the game not only makes everything you do with the lightsaber feel impactful, but I'd say the gameplay in its entirety is a combo of tons of different things that are mixed well together to feel like something new. And since I brought up the lightsaber, I think you'll truly enjoy using it in combat. Cal may not have the style or the finesse of a character you see in a modern hack and slash, but I don't think he really needs it. His standard attacks are more than capable of taking care of bad guys, but combat is more about analyzing how the enemy behaves and adjust to your fighting style and how you're supposed to adjust to them. If the enemy isn't capable of blocking any careless strikes you make, then they'll catch on to your attacks and stay out of range until they find an opportunity to strike. What this means is that you often mix up dodge rolling and fighting an opening, or parrying a particular attack so that they're left open for a counter-strike. The dodging in particular is a lot more sluggish than a lot of games on the market, since you don't get too many iframes when doing it, and you really can't spam it. It needs to be timed in tandem with the attack coming your way. It's something you'll need to get used to, so don't go in expecting a dodge that wouldn't be out of place in something like Bayonetta. It's also worth mentioning that while you can guard normally, you have this bar that depletes depending on how much you're taking. I'd advise parrying as much as possible to avoid it depleting, since those don't take away from it, but you're going to want to keep an eye on how much you are defending, because having it go down does stun you for a moment, which you really don't want. I'd especially recommend this when you're up against enemies with blasters, since parries can send bullets completely back at the target, instead of just flying off in a random direction. On the flip side, the enemies that can guard you also have the stamina bar, which you can take out for yourself and leave them open for a strong blow, or a finisher that you can do depending on the amount of health the enemy has. But the lightsaber will only get you so far. Remember,
Trust only in the Force.
Since Cal's connection to the Force is damaged when the game starts, you can only use Force Slow, which slows down one enemy for you. But as you go on and receive more moves, like Force Push and Force Pull, you can end some enemies early, or use the environment to deal with one or more of them without engaging in proper combat. But at the same time, Cal has a Force meter, meaning that you can only do so much with the Force at the moment. And since that meter only refills by landing hits with the lightsaber, it's all about strategy on when you should go in and fight enemies head on, and when you should use the Force to make the job far easier. I really like this. I think this is a really good way of getting players to learn how each enemy behaves, and it's far more engaging than just having the Force meter refill when you're not using it. That would have been pretty repetitive in hindsight. I felt really rewarded for using certain Force techniques in certain ways, so I believed I could get away with it, as well as using the select number of times the Force interacts with BD1's upgrades, namely an ability later on that lets him hack certain droids and have them fight alongside you. And that's just the stuff you start with, and a few moves you get at particular story beats. Possibilities for combat expand greatly once you take into account the skill tree that you can access at meditation points. See, by engaging in combat, by finding Force echoes, or by scanning stuff in the environment, including dead enemies, you'll earn experience that feeds into skill points. Now, Cal doesn't have any stats like an RPG character. The skill points are actually for learning new moves found here. There's a couple that extend your health and Force meter, and one that amplifies lightsaber damage near the end, and those are pretty standard, but most of them are new moves for you to play with. Some can act as good preemptive moves to get the drop on some foes, some act as combo extenders, and some act as creative passive perks like BD Stims also refilling your Force meter. That's really cool. With all these, I always have a blast with combat. There's a huge variety of enemies, big and small, and a lot of these expect you to know what you're doing with that lightsaber, but it's because they all test you in different ways that they feel good to overcome. Boss fights especially take things a step further. Early on, they are pretty standard, with most of them just being tougher versions of enemies you fought, or opponents that become regular enemies sometime later. But as the game goes on, you'll get much more climactic and challenging encounters, though for me, the 3 lightsaber duels were definitely the best ones. Both Trilla and the Night Sister have their own means of utilizing the Force and their lightsabers, and they felt like proper tests of what you knew with the combat. The fight with Taron Malicos and Dathomir is just awesome, and without a doubt the highlight of the campaign. Because the game does give you access to a lot of late game tools by this point, including an attack with 2 lightsabers, this fight is one of the best opportunities you have at using them in boss combat. But combined with Malicos himself being a fast and formidable opponent, with a big variety of lightsaber and force attacks, and Night Sister Merrin helping you out at certain points, this encounter is so much fun, and I'm glad Merrin got the chance to absolutely bury him. He was kind of a jerk. You know, when I'm thinking about it more, I fully believe this is a better Force Unleashed than the Force Unleashed. There's far more consistency when enemies can be stunned, the defensive options completely steamroll that game, and Jedi Fallen Order has a better sense of flow. But the Force in particular isn't just your ally in combat, it also plays a part in exploration. I've seen people largely compare this to several Soulsborne games in regards to how it's set up, and while my experience with Soulsbornes isn't too high, I only see that with a couple things. I personally see this as more of a 3D Zelda, with some elements of Soulsbornes, some elements of Metroidvanias, and a touch of Uncharted. I see a lot of Zelda influences based on how each part of the world has a mix of open fields and linear paths for you to travel and either find your next objective or deviate from and find some goodies which have a specific upgrade, but even more so with how some planets have what are basically dungeons within them, some mandatory, some optional. The ones on Zeffo in particular have puzzles that rely on the Force ability received within them, so yeah, the 3D Zelda vibes are strong with them. The Metroidvania elements mostly come in when you have specific upgrades lying somewhere on the map, and receiving it both unlocks a slew of new combat methods and new secrets to unlock, encouraging backtracking to previously explored worlds and seeing what you could find. I think taking this direction to upgrading Cal was a really smart call. Making him already a Jedi with a severe disconnect to the Force is a really good way to have the Metroidvania elements, as well as the skill tree here, because both communicate how this journey is his way of coming out of hiding, and it does explain why Cal starts off different than what he will be by endgame. I really do get a kick out of exploring planets because of just how much they can open up from several mandatory Force upgrades like the pull, push, and the double jump. I know it's called the Jedi Flip, but it's a double jump, I'm breaking the illusion. As well as how they handle platforming. This is where I got a hint of Uncharted, as Cal will be climbing on specific walls, swinging on vines, and sliding everywhere to explore further. Some of these are also used for action set pieces, which are all fun as well. My personal favorites being this one, the Elder Tree, while the Night Sister is on your tail, and the second phase of this boss fight where you get the high ground. You're also rewarded for exploration most of the time. I already mentioned the Force Echoes and the Scan Logs, which are all free skill point EXP, but there's also these large Force Echoes that act as pieces towards a health or Force meter upgrade, extra stims you can give BD, meaning more chances to heal, and extra cosmetics to your outfit, BD1, or the Mantis, the ship taking you across the galaxy in this game, all of which are really good rewards. It's a bummer you are not given too many opportunities to sequence break and get mandatory upgrades out of the intended order, and the game is, for the most part, linear despite the secrets you can find. But I am happy that there was one instance where the game told me I could do something earlier than intended. So the way the story plays out is that you go to Zeffo to inspect possible temples after you visit the first proper planet, Bogano, but you aren't given the chance to visit Dathomir and inspect the temple there. But that one is blocked off by an upgrade you get pretty late, and it clearly says the planet is no joke. So why go to Dathomir that early? Because along the way, you could get the double lightsaber upgrade way earlier than you're supposed to. Usually you'd get it close to the midway point, but getting it this early will make several challenges at this point way easier. The double lightsaber isn't as strong as the normal one by default, but not only is it easier to score combos with, and not only does it give you some cool moves on its own, but if you parry one bullet, you'll automatically parry any other one coming close to it. This is very helpful because it makes some stormtrooper clumps, heavy troopers, and these robots a total cakewalk. Dathomir in general is brutal for the start of the game, even if you are playing a Jedi Knight difficulty, the standard one, but I think the effort is well worth it. They don't deprive you of moments where you can breathe, since every world has the aforementioned meditation points that has the skill trees, but also let you rest to regain your health and any used BD stims, at the cost of getting every enemy you've beaten up to that point to respawn, except for bosses. It can be a little rough working around this, knowing you might need to tackle a group of enemies in one go at points, But they thought of possible ways to circumvent this whenever necessary. If you look around sometimes, you may unlock a device or a small pathway that takes you back to an earlier point in the world, which really helps trim the backtracking and avoid gauntlets if you don't want to fight as many enemies on repeat visits. Though the backtracking in the game isn't that bad, at times it's even enjoyable, and the game does tell you which parts of the current world have yet to be fully explored or still have chests hidden within, there is no fast travel option. On visits where not much has been explored, that's not an issue, but if you miss something and start to do cleanup duty if you want to 100% the game, that's when the lack of a fast travel becomes an inconvenience. The map does pinpoint your location and unexplored parts, but doesn't give you an idea as to where undiscovered chests are, and given that they can be hidden even underwater, yeah, that running around and cleaning adds up. It's why I admit I didn't go for 100% despite my overall enjoyment of the game, because really, all I would be doing was adding a bunch of time in between story beats just for some cosmetics, which I was already totally satisfied with what I got, though I wish you had access to all the lightsaber colors earlier. I was already satisfied playing the main campaign and exploring to see what collectibles I could find, but after launch, they gave us a free update that had a New Game Plus mode and the Meditation Arena. The former lets you play the entire game again with all the cosmetics you already got, plus an Inquisitor costume complete with a red lightsaber? Oh, I've been looking forward to this.
Look at this, a lightsaber.
I don't know about you, Trilla, but if I were positioned alongside you, and I saw that our target was wearing an Inquisitor attire and had the same lightsaber color as you, my reaction would be more like this.
Raider!
It's a shame that the mandatory force upgrades, skill tree upgrades, and extra stims do not carry over, and even on repeated playthroughs, you can't skip cutscenes, which is really annoying, but hey, I'll take what I can get. But the Meditation Arena is what took the cake for me. There's plenty of challenges to let you take on waves of enemies, or even bosses, that reward you with rank points that you can use to unlock a few more cosmetics. I'm okay with the ranking being determined by 3 exact things, those being just beating the challenge, not using any healing stims, and not taking any damage, but I think that last one severely limits approach options to playing these, encouraging a little too much defensive play. I mean, the Jedi have always had nobility, but this is just getting old for me, especially in some battles like fighting Trilla and the Ninth Sister at the same time. Jeez. But what's even better is that you can actually make your own arenas to either provide a fun challenge or just watch enemies duke it out. That last one especially gets really fun, even if the rocket troopers are always in an impasse. To add on to that, Inquisitor Cal is a boss you can fight. Man, it is so cool to see Cal's complete moveset be translated into a boss variant, and holy cow does he put up a fight. At the end of the day, the main campaign is still the main bulk of the game, but it did its job in making it extremely immersive and fun with all the locations you visit, all the upgrades you get, and all the enemies you fight, but the extras alongside it add that little cherry on top that made it feel more special. If I had an accolade I could give this game, it would absolutely be that it is my pick for the biggest gaming surprise of 2019. I remained incredibly wary of it given what EA did with Battlefront 2 DICE, and even after it came out, I was waiting for that one moment where EA would add some kind of predatory monetization practice to the game after they got the good reviews, especially when Activision did that to Nitro Fueled. But not only am I overjoyed that that never happened, but I am also overjoyed that I ended up enjoying this game as much as I did. I really do get a feeling like this game was made by people who love Star Wars and wanted to make their own story in it, while not being lassoed down by anything weird from EA or Disney. And from this revisit, I'd honestly say that my thoughts from back then still apply now, and that is more than a good thing. It certainly has some rough spots, but it gets too many other things right for them to be that big of a deal. The Force is indeed strong with this one, and if you love the series, I definitely recommend this one. You bet I'm looking forward to seeing how Jedi Survivor takes things to the next level. I mean, now that this video is live, it is already out, so maybe it'll be a subject next time. Or I might talk about it earlier if it ends up being one of my favorite games of 2023. Wow, it is not even next year, and I'm already planning for future videos. Wait a minute, I have quite a few separate kinds of videos, which could all be seen as the equivalent to having a bunch of spin-off shows available the same way. Huh, I guess it's possible to learn that power. I'm Lightning Ripper. Special thanks to Bubba Hyde and Anonymous Donor for their donations to my Play Live campaign, and may the Force be with you all.